Now, it's been a month since the teaser trailer and the news about Pikmin 2 was announced. It was unexpected, not gonna lie. And over the month of May, I've been sort of thinking about Pikmin 2 in general, apart from this game being the predecessor, mainly with how the game would perform once it gets released, which I will sort of be discussing a couple topics about Pikmin 2 here. So I'm making this video being a 1 year prior before Pikmin 2's official release, a pre-release if you will. Since there's not really much a lot of information about Pikmin 2, I'm just gonna keep this video short and simple. Might as well start off the video right now, so without further ado, let's get into the video. Guess we'll start off with a bit of context here. Not really a lot, but from what we have currently. We'll rewind this to the end of April or at the start of May. So the developers announced its 5.5 update, that being the Crash System season. Nothing unusual, practically just having players to do is update the game in time for the 12th anniversary. Which, can I say that the 12th anniversary was the most meh anniversary we had? Obviously nothing tops the 10th anniversary on how chaotic and good it was. Even for the 11th anniversary, which was also I guess a little decent, it still did a lot more better than the 12th anniversary. Side tangent aside, once the players have downloaded the update and booted up the game, they were first presented with the teaser trailer that you've probably seen a few times already. Obviously with it having saying that something big is coming. And towards the end where it says about where it lands into 2026. During that time a lot of players were theorizing what could it be or what could it be hinting at. Could it be a massive update? A new game, possibly? Which I'll get there in a moment. But at that time, a lot of players were theorizing what could it actually be, which we weren't necessarily sure, aside from that vague trailer. I've made my video on a few predictions I had, which were all debunked. However, a few days after it was announced that the teaser trailer was actually for their new game called Pikmin 2. As I said in the last video that I was talking about it, or in the intro, it was pretty unexpected. I didn't thought that would make a second game, or I guess in this case, a somewhat of a sequel. Now, for many players, it could be seen that this is the most unnecessary thing to even exist. However, if you were to go to the Pixel 3's Discord server and do a little bit of a search filtering, prior to May 1st of this year, you can see a couple of users mentioning about a Pixel 3D too. Either take those being a joke or they're actually serious. But anyways, the news is out, the game is going to be developed and be released next year. But the developers have been pretty quiet from spelling out any information about it. The only information that we got for now is being that FAQ that they released a few days after it was announced, and a few other teasers. The second teaser pretty much showing that the prototype is going to be in the game, which honestly, let the prototype be in the game on day one. It's been catching L's as of these past few years, one practically just being during the 10th anniversary when it didn't got an anniversary version, but instead the anti-champion did. It did get nerfed during the armory rebound that was 3 months ago, and from the most unusual place, the OG gun tournament, losing to, you guessed it, the anti-champion. And with third teaser trailer that recently released that could sort of insinuate that environmental damage could be a thing. Could be a teardown or a battlefield type of destruction, and that's all the information that we have as of currently. We're not sure if there's going to be any more information that's going to be coming forward in the future, but only time will tell. Now let's just see what the community thinks about Pikmin 2. Boy, this will be enjoyable. Now with the announcement, it has garnered a lot of attention and comments that talk about them being excited for the release of Pikmin 2. While the other side, not a lot of players are really loving it. Now you might be questioning why most of these people aren't necessarily too happy with Pikmin 2's existence. Which some of them are pretty much dropping the gun and pretty much saying that it's gonna fail, which there is a good reason on why they sort of believe in that. Now if you know me, I always like to play both sides. I'm not here to favor one side more than the other. I always love to hear both sides of the story and to rather than come up with my own conclusion, which I'll get to that later through the video. Which will start off on the community's opinions about it, starting off on the negative side. Which is pretty easy to be able to understand, as they have a few keywords that are practically been most common. One key point that's pretty common with most of these comments practically talk about the microtransactions. For most of the players that played the game for years, you probably remember how microtransactions sort of are in this game. Sometimes most of the weapons would sort of be logged into offers that can't necessarily be obtainable free-to-play wise without having to pay for it. With a few offers that can obtain weapons that can pretty much be a lot more broken than compared to a player that only relies on the gallery, autos, or even the event sets. Though nowadays it's not really much of an issue, mostly. Can we just talk about how they manage to monetize the events nowadays? Though I feel like it's generally not really enough to sort of satisfy most players. It doesn't help that on the same day that was announced, on their Twitter thread, you can possibly have to find a comment that was hidden talking about even more microtransactions. Do you guys remember the FAQ that was released a few days after it was announced, with it answering 5 common questions, and one of the questions talks about would spending money would sort of benefit you here. Developers have said that it's going to be a lot more different than it is with Pixel 3D, with it being a lot more on the even playing field. Without hiding that comment and possibly a lot more, this sort of discredits them a little here. If I were the social media manager for their Twitter account and was found by that, I would pretty much just leave it there. I'm not necessarily going to interfere with it. I could possibly respond to it, though I'm not going to go to the point of either deleting or hiding the comment. Just doing that will probably make you a lot more skeptical here. Another common key point which gets mentioned a couple times, similar to the first key point, that being why couldn't they just fix the current game instead of having to make another game? It just feels like they're just making another game instead of having to just fix the current game that they have. Which in my first video talking about fixing it too, I mentioned the reason why they started making a second game. With the game being 12 years old and with the netcode practically being a cluttering mess, the only option that would be a lot more reasonable is to make another game instead of having to fix the current game, which I'll talk about that part in the next segment of the video. We'll switch this part with some positive reception. Aren't a lot, as the negative reception does win a lot more than the positive. But there's a couple that talks about them being excited for Pixel 2 or being unexpectedly surprised by it. But yeah, we're done with this segment and we're gonna head off to the next segment here. In my last Pixel 2 video, I talked about my opinions about it, which makes you question, has my opinion changed about it 1 month after? To answer that question, not really. Just focus on the game here in general. I feel like Pixel 2 shouldn't necessarily exist, but who cares? Pixel 2 is in development now. I don't mind Cubic Games to make another game, especially their track record, as they're not necessarily that best when it comes to handling a second game. Around 2017, when Cubic Games took control through 2025, the developers only created a few games, with only one game being successful, or in this case, managed to survive. Obviously, the only game that they have currently being Pixel 3D, which is still here. Cubic Games had a second game, which was a lot more different to Pixel 3D, which you probably remember, which not a lot of people would even remember as well, that being Last Craft Survival. Anyone who doesn't know, Last Craft Survival is pretty much considered taking Minecraft and Fallout and put them into one game. It was released in 2018, however, 2 years after, it would later be discontinued. Or abandoned, as there's no official statement on why it was discontinued. And technically their latest game that they had, that being Block City Wars. I did say technically since it wasn't created by Cubic Games, however from a different development team. But back in 2023, they decided to do is take the rights to it in order to create Block City Wars 2.0. And almost the same outcome as Last Craft Survival, however, with this small clip here, pretty much show. It wasn't until late 2024 when they announced that Block City Wars 2.0 would stop receiving any updates, or in this case, halt for any service. Though Block City Wars 2.0 still exists to this day, it's practically just been shelved from any future development. They do plan to continue doing future development, however there hasn't been much news about it since. And now with their upcoming game, who knows the outcome for it? Do I think it's gonna do well for starters? I will assume that it will do decently well. For PC, it'll probably do a little bit more better than Pixel 3 on Steam. For mobile, it might do a lot more better than the PC side. But I feel like for the teaser trailer, I thought it was going to be some sort of overhaul that Pixel 3 is going to take, which honestly is one thing that I would have hoped that Pixel 3 would have done. I didn't say this in my previous video, but 1 month after, I thought of this where Cubic Games could have done was do a remaster to Pixel 3D, re-releasing the game, or I guess adding in a massive update that could have the netcode be organized to the point where you have to do is add features that the community has been asking for years, which would be the solution to Pixel 3D's problem, but also not necessarily needing to create a second game for it. which is the reason why Pixel 2 is even existing. But I have the most slim chance that I would think that they would even do a remaster even after Pixel 2's release. However, one can only dream, or unless it's secretly in the works, which I highly doubt. As we're talking about Pixel 3D here, might as well talk about it a little bit more further. With them saying that both Pixel 3D and 2 will coexist, might as well give some solutions to Pixel 3D for the time being. I do agree with some of the comments talking about fixing the game before or instead of making another game, as there are some parts that does need to either be resolved or needs to be finished. We could talk about Clans, which the Ruby Division is expected to be released later this month, as well as more divisions to be released in the future. We could talk about the campaign, which is expected to be finished this year. We could talk about weapon balancing, since as a recent event with the Great Defender, how do you allow that weapon to exist? That weapon can be able to hit like a truck. We had the Gojo's Wrath from the anime volume 3 season, now we just have the Great Defender here, and the upcoming Sniper being the Desert Verdict. I'm kind of scared, and probably one thing that you probably hear a lot of people say, make the game a lot more free-to-play friendly. I mean, where we are now, it's decently free-to-play friendly, but might as well increase that a little bit more. Give free-to-play players a little bit more better rewards in events than where it is now, especially with that event that happened back in May. And coming from the first half of the last segment, in building back that community's trust. It's been an on and off thing where the community has some leniency towards the developers, but often at times it would either be broken because of something that they promised just for it to not even be a thing. One thing I could think of is crossplay, as the developers have stated that they were going to do is add crossplay as an option. However, more than a year after, hasn't been released to this day. Guess that'll do for that segment. Now for Pixel 2, which is just a few things I'm just hoping to see. One thing that I think it could be helpful is giving some times where they'll have playtest phases for the community. This can be crucial, as this will allow the community to just test out the game before its official release. This will also allow the developers to do is have some input on what the community thinks of and what they like or dislike. I'm hoping for some specific dates where there can be some playtest periods to happen, different dates for the testing periods while having different builds of the game to test out. I guess this last part is practically being my prediction on what could be in Pixel 2. I was hoping for this for Pixel 3D, but I feel like for Pixel 2 it might as well be here as well, that being a map creator. Obviously allowing the community to just create their own maps and such, which I feel like would be useful for Pixel 3D because that was the last time we had a new map. I guess this other thing, which is a bit of a gray area, being the ability to do is like mod the game. It can have its benefits, but also its drawback. And the second game would be a lot more slow pace and more casual than Pixel 3D. I wonder what Pixel 2's monetization would be. Will it be the same way that what Pixel 3D is, or probably be a lot more, I guess, with cosmetic based? Let's just hope the leveling system that's in Pixel 3D doesn't go into the second game, because Jesus Christ, it's a lot tedious to handle. I do have one feature I think could be added to both these games, however, I do have to wait for more information about Pixel, so I might as well brainstorm that idea. And that's gonna do for this video. Thank you guys for watching. I hope this video was informative. If you guys are excited for Pixel 2, or probably not, let me know in the comments down below. I'm still gonna make short videos about some Pixel 2 news, mostly the important news, so stay tuned. And that's gonna do for me. So as always, guys, one día, noche, o cuando estás viendo este video, I'll see you guys in the next video.